So let's talk about how companies keep track of all of this inventory. In this video, I will talk about two types of inventory systems that companies use to manage inventory. So there are two types of inventory systems that companies use to manage inventory. That's either a periodic inventory system or a perpetual inventory system. A periodic inventory system is exactly that. You monitor inventory levels randomly or periodically. It's a good way to remember. Periodic, you do it periodically in periods or increments. You don't consistently monitor the inventory levels like you do with a perpetual inventory system. A perpetual inventory system continuously monitors inventory levels. This is also called a continuous system. So usually there is some input required when it comes to a perpetual inventory system. For example, when you go to a retail store and that barcode is scanned, that inventory is taken out if that company uses a perpetual inventory system. So let's take a look at both of these to compare and contrast periodic and perpetual inventory systems. So first, a periodic system requires a physical count to know the exact inventory balances. This is when you have to actually go into the warehouse and count all of the inventory, or even in the retail store and count the inventory that you have. Now, that is going to be very challenging for a big business. So something that I will mention is periodic systems aren't for huge retail space, right? It's not for big businesses. Periodic systems are for small businesses, not large retail businesses. So a perpetual system, however, knows the exact amount of inventory at all times. Again, it consistently or continuously updates. That's why it's more suitable for large businesses, because when you have a ton of inventory, you want that process to be easy to manage, and you can do that using a perpetual inventory system. Now, with that, you guessed it, a periodic system, something that you can really manually do yourself, not expensive at all. So for a small business to have a periodic inventory system, very easy to use, not expensive to maintain. A perpetual system, on the other hand, does require a lot of maintenance. So it is much more expensive compared to a periodic system. So again, perpetual systems are for companies, usually large companies, but also for those high volume, high value items. If you have a ton of inventory, you want to go with a perpetual system if you or your company can afford it. If you have small inventory or small amounts of inventory, low value, a perpetual system is probably not necessary. And this again is where a periodic system is more appropriate. The other thing I'll mention too, when it comes to a perpetual inventory system, is it's best for accurate financial statements. Remember in another video, I talked about inventory being cash. So for companies to know, let's say when they're filing taxes, they need to know exactly how much inventory they have on the shelf, right? So a perpetual system saves them a ton of time and money because they know exactly how much cash they have on the shelf at all times. So this one is going to be best if you want accurate financial statements at all times, where you can look and see how much inventory you have and say, okay, we have $1.2 million in inventory. You can't do that with a periodic system. You have to actually physically count the inventory to know what that valuation is. When it comes to a periodic and perpetual inventory system, you or your business gets to choose which type of inventory system you will use. However, when it comes to the parties or third parties you work with, like your suppliers, they too may have a specific type of inventory system. So if your supplier uses a periodic inventory system, there's something called an open window, and that is the time in which you can place an order. So the supplier says from the 1st through the 5th, for example, it's the only time our order window is open. So if you're ordering raw material or anything from us, you must place your order between the 1st and the 5th of the month during the open order window. Again, they use a periodic system, so to help control that inventory, they only allow for orders during a certain time of the month. Anything outside of that window or when that window is closed, you cannot put an order in. So remember that open order window is also associated with a periodic inventory system. So key takeaways. If you're in big business, you want to go with the perpetual inventory system. It's going to be expensive. However, you're going to always have accurate financial statements, and you're going to know exactly how much inventory you have on hand at all times. And if you're a smaller business, you want to go with a periodic inventory system. It's going to be least expensive to maintain. Yes, you have to physically count the inventory. It's not good for financial statements because you have to count the inventory to know exactly how much inventory you have before you can produce those financial statements. But again, it's very inexpensive. And lastly, it is absolutely perfect for when that supplier has an open order window and you can only order inventory at a specific time.